Okay, so I wanted to just get a spoiler-free one of these out and up because, one, it's busy here, two, it's starting to become a crapshoot on monetizing reviews of new movies again, which is not great, so multi-formats might have to also be a thing again, which also isn't great, and three, there's kind of layered discourse stuff on this one, so I figured it's worth getting multiple takes up for whatever that's worth. In any case, if you're not even going to watch to the end of a spoiler-free one of these, it's really good. You know, elephant in the room, yeah, there was probably never going to be a way to follow up something that was as once in a generation as the first Black Panther. You know, you can't recreate what happened there, something that was so huge it really did kind of eclipse and become a bigger thing in and of itself than the Marvel Universe or Disney brand worlds that it was rising out of, and that really became doubly and tragically the case when your lead star passes away while also having your whole production scuttled by global pandemic, and you have to reinvent not just a whole sequel but a whole franchise connected to all the other stuff in real time. The fact that they didn't ultimately just say, you know what, this will be too heavy of a lift for anybody, there's a whole bigger cinematic universe that the characters in the world can branch out into, maybe this series goes on the shelf for a few and we regroup and figure this out. That's impressive in and of itself to not do that. The fact that they still made a terrific movie out of the sequel, even if maybe not exactly the equal of the first one, is nothing short of incredible. Seriously, there's just no point in pretending that anything about this movie is extricable from the conditions under which it exists, even with the not inconsequential facts of how well constructed and efficient the Marvel machinery is known to be, and the idea that they had all of Disney's power and cash at their disposal, that Wakanda Forever pulls off a satisfying A-tier blockbuster when well-intentioned misfire or actual disaster were both extremely possible options, make it an achievement worth celebrating and admiring. Period. Now, speaking of, the spoiler-free, you've seen the commercials version of a summary would also be T'Challa is gone and nobody knows what to do about that. There's no MCU stuff that would be a spoiler reason behind it. It feels like they're basically just seeding, look, we all know that the world is going to conflate this character and this actor, that's why we didn't recast, so let's just go with that. Probably the right decision from where I sit. So as a result of that, and probably all the Thanos Infinity War blip stuff before that, the whole optimistic guess Wakanda's gonna get involved with the world ending from the first movie is kind of stalled out in his absence, but they're also not hidden anymore, so things are getting hot geopolitically since the royal family and friends are all different varieties of messed up and pushed apart from each other by grief and disagreement on how best to grieve, so yeah, all of which gets blown up even worse by the revelation that there's another sci-fi fantasy Marvel civilization that's been concealing itself from the world since the colonization era, this one with a Mesoamerican origin and being fish people living underwater as their method of remaining hidden, ready to poke its head out into the MCU, who also have their own superhuman warrior king in Namor, who's already adopted the Killmonger outlook on world affairs a long time ago and decided he's not going to wait around for the world that's already starting to test the defenses of Wakanda to come and make trouble for him. He's going to start shit now and wants Wakanda to decide which side they're on. There's more, a lot more, possibly too much more going on than that, political and family fighting within the Wakanda over how they're going to manage and who's in charge now that there isn't a Black Panther in multiple different senses. They're not immediately forthcoming shape of what Namor's plan is, how he and his people came to be, what they are, and what it has to do with Wakanda and the rest of the Marvel Universe, American military spycraft stuff that might as well just be stamped, just bookmark this for Captain America 4 and Thunderbolts, guys, and most prominently the main B-plot involving why Namor and the Wakandans both end up fighting over an American teenage science genius named Riri Williams, aka Ironheart, who makes her own Iron Man-type suits, but since we're up into the 30s on Marvel movies now, that's just a thing someone can do in a story as opposed to being the reason they're in the story. So yeah, we've now kind of jumped genres here from solo superhero movie with a big supporting cast and lots of world building to full-on sci-fi fantasy geopolitics war movie with an ensemble cast instead of a singular lead. Like I said, that's quite a lift, even without all the other stuff. Nominally, the main character arc belongs to Letitia Wright as Shuri. She's the one going through the big central stages of grief and mourning story arc that mirrors the arc of the plot itself, but whether or not by original design or other circumstance of production, it's definitely not only her movie or a star vehicle in any traditional sense. There are varying points where multiple other characters are driving the action or in command of big parts of the plot without accounting for how prominent Namor fits into things as the by now almost expected MCU issue, sympathetic and has a point but the bad guy because he insists on being a dick about it villain character, and yet it still works. This impossible task of a movie works. It's a good sequel to Black Panther, it's a worthwhile and genuinely moving memorial to Chadwick Boseman while also not turning the entire endeavor into a funeral piece. It has a lot of moving parts, but they're all interesting and compelling while also being bonkers and weird, like on top of everything else, making Namor somehow not completely ridiculous despite the fact, and even with the cool reimagining of his character and background with new ancient Mayan aesthetic happening, he's still very much the dude flying around in green swim trunks and Spock ears with little adorable wings on his heels, but they still sell him as a threatening don't fuck with me guy and pull it off, while also making his foot soldiers and their whole vibe cool and scary in a way that we haven't really seen underwater people be in something like this for a while. I also like how much variety of stuff is going on here. The water creature business is very distinct from Wakanda's whole Afrofuturist vibranium thing, plus we get to see more of how their Navy, Air Force, and Special Ops carry off, and that's pretty cool. While there's probably some ink to unavoidably be spilled in the coming months about what point at which her character was actually worked into the story or in such a prominent role, Dominique Thorne is really making a cool debut as Ironheart, and the addition of some Iron Man, but also not Iron Man mech suit action into the mix is very welcome. It all looks cool. The fact of it is, this is good, solid stuff, and it's made more so by how confident it feels. You can see the stuff that's building to the next movies or shows, like in all of these, but it's more organic than usual here. The humor is present, but it's layered, and the disparate threads for the different characters, subplots, allegories to bigger real-world issues all coalesce extremely well, even if you basically know where things have to be going, if you recognize the moral and emotional message it's attempting to get across in the telling. Although, while I feel like the decision to forego a lot of the expected coming up next in the MCU business as it's wrapping up is the right decision, the housekeeping that seems to be standing there instead may be a bit on the abrupt side, but not enough to lessen the overall estimation. Now, I'm someone who's had a lot of fun with the very bizarre stretch Marvel elected to make of Phase 4, but it's also very demonstrable that, especially in the order of release department, they've been leaning heavy on a vibe of, hey, the world almost ended for real and everything is sad outside, so let's just have some fun, huh? You know, for the most part, which makes a lot of sense, but it's still satisfying and does end up feeling overdue to see the studio, and especially a talent like Ryan Coogler, step up at this particular moment for this property and deliver a return to more of an A-tier, okay, put on a jacket and use the good silverware event version of what they do here again. So I'm giving Wakanda Forever an 8 out of 10, which I'm sure will make a huge difference for a movie that everyone was going to see anyway.